how do you feel when you premiere a film and play it before a new audience? How does that feel? Are you anxious?
You know what? I kind of feel like the die is cast. Like I got married over the weekend, and I decided really stupidly to like sing a song to my new bride, and I was just so like viciously. I was so nervous. I wasn't worried about like the ceremony or the party, but just this one goddamn song I was just sweating over for weeks. So to kind of have no control over an audience's reaction is kind of liberating. I'm thrilled to see it with an audience, but I'm not going to have to do much. So that's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, congratulations on getting married.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Before we get started on Pasadena, I'd like to get a sense of when and how you first became interested in filmmaking.
For sure. It was actually, I can remember very specifically. I was in Miss Jerzemolinsky's Spanish class, and I didn't want to take a very advanced Spanish class. I was in high school, and I took a Spanish in film class. So those are sort of Spanish for idiots, and we would watch all the Almodovar movies, but specifically not specifically, but in addition Buñuel, and we would start on Buñuel, and the first movie we ever saw in that class was Un Chien Andalou, and I remember going to see it at a museum, and I was just blown away. This was the first time I saw that movies could actually be art. I love movies. I was obsessed with Star Wars when I was little, and I would watch like Breaking Away and like Field of Dreams like obsessively on my beta. But like this was the first time I really thought it could do something interesting. So from there, I was just obsessed. I watched all the Scorsese and all the yada yada, the usual suspects, all the Kubrick. But it was actually really the Un Chien Andalou. I don't know, Buñuel. I'm a big Buñuel guy. I really like him. I do.
Well, that's if you're going to have a major influence. I mean, you can't go wrong with Buñuel. So what was it about Buñuel's particular voice that spoke to you?
Well, you know what it really was is his sense of humor. I thought it was really, really funny. Like, you ever seen that movie El Ángel Exterminador, the one where they can't leave the dinner party? Like, I think Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, like they can't sit down at the dinner party, but he kind of did a reverse one in Mexico City where it's this dinner party. These like bougie people are at this dinner party, and they were tired of like the drawing room or whatever. And then just for whatever reason, they just can't leave. And, like, their very closed, careful, polite society just devolves into, like, animal chaos. And, like, there's, like, sheep walking by and people die and, like, they're ripping off their clothes. And I don't know. I just think he's really funny. And I always like that about him.
So does that kind of heightened tone, do you find that creeping into your own sensibilities as a filmmaker?
Well, I don't know. I think with this movie specifically, it's so autobiographical that all I was trying to do was capture what my family sounds like. I'm not particularly proud of this, but I would go to like family events and like excuse myself to go to the bathroom and then like scribble down conversation that had just happened. So that's really all I was trying to capture. I didn't want it just to be handheld, and I didn't want it to feel like a documentary. I was with my cinematographer Lucas Lee Graham. I was very careful and kind of proud that we were able to pull off some of these dinner scenes on a slider and add a little bit of movement to things, and frankly able to cast people like Peter Bogdanovich and Cheryl Hines, which I think heightens it beyond just a guy with a video camera shooting in a house. Like hopefully it feels cinematic and feels like a movie, but the dialogue I really wanted to make sound real.
I was just thinking about this the other day about family, because every family, every person has their own particular eccentricities. But when I was thinking about my family the other day, I thought, you live with them, so they don't necessarily strike you as eccentric,
right?
Until you bring outsiders into it, like a friend or something, and you experience them through their eyes, and all of a sudden you discover, oh yeah, they are a little weird.
No, it's completely true, and I think everyone's family is weird in their own particular way. And I grew up in Washington D.C. and my parents were heavily involved in government. They're basically government bureaucrats. And my dad worked at the Pentagon, and I just remember people coming over and like, my dad talking about, I don't know, the Tutsis and the Hutus, or like whatever was happening in Rwanda, or like Kosovo, or Bosnia, or Iraq, or Afghanistan, and this would kind of blow my friends away, but for me, that was just like, this was dinner table conversation. So in writing the movie, the main character, he's an academic. My dad isn't an academic. He worked in the Pentagon for a bunch of years, but the Peter Bogdanovich character is a foreign policy expert, and he has this whole argument about why the Iraqi army wasn't actually disbanded and all this stuff. I think that's probably my particular family's eccentricity, but hopefully the stuff that counts, all the interpersonal relationships, I think are pretty universal. Like I think my dad did have an earlier marriage where he had 2 daughters, and then he had me. So the kind of central tension of the movie are these half children and their interaction with their father's new family. Yes, it's kind of unique, but I think a lot of people have that particular relationship, and it's a tricky one. It's very, very hard to figure out exactly who's related to who and why, and then hopefully that's what the movie's about.
Well, here's the big question. So when I would imagine that you've shown your family your film.
You know what? I have not. I have not shown my family. I know. They know about it. I've told them about it, but I've been a big wuss about the whole thing. So
are you afraid of their reaction?
Terrified! Oh my God, I'm petrified. I've been afraid for 2 years, but ever since I wrote the first crappy draft of the script, I've been worried about their reaction. So yeah, I should probably get over it. You're right, Jamie. I should probably send them the movie at this point. So I don't know. Maybe check back in after they've disowned me. We'll see what happens.
No, I'm sure they'll be incredibly proud.
Well,
so you worked. I was reading something. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but you worked at the Film Independent.
I do. I still work there, and we produce the LA Film Festival and the Independent Spirit Awards. And I actually work. The main thing I do, or one of the main things I do, is I work in an events department where we produce screenings and workshops and classes, and I'm like an event producer. That's my day job. Yep.
So you've directed other films before.
I have, yeah.
I think this is the first one that you've written.
It is indeed, yeah. And I've actually written other things before, but this is the first feature that I've written myself and directed. And I mean, like legitimate dream come true to have all those, hyper autobiographical. Wrote it myself, directed it myself, worked with actors that I deeply respected. It really was kind of a perfect storm that I'd been working towards ever since that fateful day I saw Un Chien Andalou at the age of 15.
But it was, from something that I read of you, it wasn't until you're watching, I think it was Tiny Furniture with you.
Oh, yeah.
Ben girlfriend, that it hit you that you could do this.
That's exactly right. The woman to whom I'm now related by marriage, we were watching Tiny Furniture together, and I know Lena a little bit, not a ton, but we kind of run in the same world a bit. And I work at the LA Film Festival, so I'd seen a screener of it, and actually, Lena and my first movie played at Slam Dance a bunch of years ago, and she had a short that played there, and we met each other there. So I'm not going to pretend we're friends, but I knew about this movie, about Tiny Furniture, and I remember watching it alone, and I just remember saying that the writing is so good, and it really is like sort of if Woody Allen had been like a 23-year-old girl, and I knew my girlfriend would be into it, so I took it home and I watched it with her, and I loved it. I actually loved how it was shot as well. But I remember turning off the movie, and my girlfriend turns to me and she's like, "You could do that." I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "No, it's like that's not that far off from what you could do." I was like, No, what do you mean?" She's like, "Well, you should just write about your family, And I was like, "Oh, yeah, maybe I should." And I was really impressed by the writing. I was really impressed by how it was shot, given how much money it was made for. But first and foremost, I was really struck by her honesty. She just, she seemed to have no problem eviscerating everyone, including herself first and foremost. And I think that was a very valuable lesson to learn. And it was kind of like stopping a wuss, just write. It's not that big a deal. And I think especially for this sort of movie where you don't have any money and it's all in one location, and you're getting your friends to help out and all that sort of thing. If you write something that's grounded and honest, that's what'll pop. Like I could write about aliens, but I don't really have the money to make that movie. But if I write about my family, go ahead.
Let me ask you this about the writing process, because I mean, I'm sure you wrote and rewrote, but when do you know and how do you know that it's good enough?
That's a great question. I wish I had a clever answer for you. I think I'm always very careful about carrots, like at the end of a draft. There are like 5 or 6 people I really want to send it to, and they're usually friends and people I think are smart and all that. And I want to, I really use them as a gauge, not whether it's good or bad, but on whether I'm excited to send them. I mean, I really don't send a first draft out to very many people. But if I send a second or third and I'm feeling like it's getting somewhere, then I'll know. I should probably be much more embarrassed and ashamed about early drafts, but I'm not. I'm an egomaniac and I'm cocky as hell about my writing, and I am, and I think things are ready probably way earlier than they actually are. Yeah.
So tell me about the casting process. I mean, because I'm particularly fascinated. I know you get asked about this a lot. You have to. In the dynamic of directing someone who is himself such a legendary director.
Well, I think, I think the casting is the real story of this movie. If we hadn't gotten people like this, I would just be another dude who'd written a white person problem movie about my family. But the fact that I hired a casting director named Paul Ruddy, who is just superb at his job and knows how agency politics works and is not afraid of those people, and new managers and agents that I had zero contact with. And he could do things like have Cheryl Hines come in and read, which was just mind-blowing for me. In terms of working with Peter specifically, I mean, Peter was on our list very early on. My producer Graham actually mentioned him early on. He's like, wouldn't that be interesting? I was like, yeah, that'd be cool. I was obviously obsessed with him just as a fan of movies, and I remember seeing him on Charlie Rose a bunch of times, and he was just so funny and so charismatic and just so smart. And the 3 things I wanted out of Poppy when we were casting is, 1, I wanted him to be an intellectual. I wanted him to have some, kind of intellectual heft. 2, I wanted him to be a little bit of a womanizer, to have that edge to him. And 3, I wanted him to be powerful. He really needed to be the patriarch of this family. It was really a story about his fall, about the patriarch, about seeing your dad as just a guy. Seeing your dad as that moment when you first realize your dad's a human being and he's not this god. That's kind of what the movie's about. And Peter fit all those criteria, and he did it in a very, very effortless way, I thought. He has this kind of rumpled, out of it, very self-involved, but in a sweet way, intellectual quality, which was perfect for the movie, and which I hadn't. It was there, but he really brought it out. I'm very, very proud of working with him. In terms of him being, so experienced, I just remember the first phone conversation I had with him when he had said yes, which was a crazy experience in and of itself. But we talked for like an hour, and as with Buñuel, I just thought the guy was really funny. He was cool, and we talked about we both thought Owen Wilson was a genius, and he liked the script, which was crazy to hear that voice saying that hello Will, I really enjoy your work. I thought it was just a crazy thing. And also it was I had this weird moment with him on the phone the first time we talked, where I could sense, I don't want to overstep my bounds here to say things I shouldn't, but he was an actor. Like, he had an actor's almost insecurity, and which in a great way, in kind of an open way. I could tell that he was open to being directed, and you know, there were definitely moments on set where he would tell me that I wouldn't need certain shots, and that I was shooting too much, and that, you know, I should be covering it a certain way. But I think if you're confident about your ideas and you're calm and you're polite, you can get away with it. And I think that it helped that I had written the script. I think he really did like the script, and the fact that the guy who had written in the script was telling him to walk from point A to point B 75 times. I think that let me off the hook a little bit.
Yeah. So since it is such a kind of a personal material that you've written, did you have the luxury of having a lot of conversation about it, or did the actors kind of feel like it all came from the page?
Well, we had no time for rehearsal, and I don't even know if actors like to rehearse. I know I would love to rehearse, but I think for them it's a different process. But one thing I was very, very careful about was I would go to dinner with each one of them, and I would have these either long lunches or long dinners. I remember specifically with Ashton, the guy that plays Jacob, my character. We went to this epic dinner and did 2-3 hours, and this was basically my rehearsal time. It was just one-on-one with them, each of them. I really wanted to do it with each of them, really build their trust, really just talk. And the great thing about doing a movie about family is that everyone's got a family, and immediately we would start talking about their family and their situation and what they would bring to the character and why it was personal to them, and I think that was incredibly valuable, and it saved us time. We had one day of rehearsal before we started shooting, which was basically just running through the scenes with each actor and then a table read at the end of the day. But no, my rehearsal was really these epic dinners, which I'd take all the actors to, one by one. Yeah.
Were there any moments when the writer part of you and the director part of you kind of had to butt heads, and one had to acquiesce to the other?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I had to rewrite. The biggest rewrite I did was on the day. I don't know if you've seen the movie or not, but there's a big. I know our audience hasn't. So there's a big blow up at Thanksgiving. The whole movie is based around Thanksgiving, and everything, all the secrets, all the lies, all the problems come to a head at this big climactic Thanksgiving. And one of the characters, Lindsay's husband, TJ, who's played by a guy named Ross. Totally blanking. Can we actually? Hold on. Okay, so can I actually start that just so I don't sound like I forgot Ross's name? Okay. Yeah, because that's bad. He's actually a buddy. So, okay. So yeah, no, you're totally right. For those who haven't seen the movie, there's a big Thanksgiving blow-up scene where all the secrets and all the lies of the movie and all the problems come to a head at this big Thanksgiving scene. And the guy who plays the character of TJ, this guy Ross Partridge, he came to me the day we were going to shoot it all in one day. And he came to me that morning. He's like, "This doesn't make sense." I was like, "No, what do you mean we'll just shoot?" He's like, "No, it doesn't make sense. My character wouldn't do this." And it's kind of the nightmare scenario as a director, because you're like, "No, we have 20 minutes before you got to get into makeup, and I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to get a shot of this." But as a writer, I was saying, "Shit, I got to kind of write my way out of this." So I remember saying, "Okay, guys, I just to the whole crew, everyone, I need just like an hour." And I sat down with Ross, and Ross is a fantastic actor, and he's one of the reasons this movie works in my mind. But he's not one of the leads. He's a supporting character, but his input and his perspective on the scene was incredibly important to make it work. So we sat down together and we rewrote the thing for an hour, and we needed that time. So that was probably the biggest one for me.
So when you watch the finished film now, does anything about it surprise you at all?
I honestly think Peter's performance is the one thing that is just such a one-off, because he's nothing like my dad. My dad is, one thing that was in the script is Peter's Jewish. Peter looks Jewish, and my dad is certainly not Jewish. My mother is Jewish, and there was this tension in the movie or in the script where the two older sisters are not Jewish, but the stepmother's Jewish, and it's not really in there, and we didn't hit it that hard, but like Cheryl does not look Jewish, and there, just and Cheryl looks kind of very California, and my mother's from New York, and it's just funny how some of that stuff transforms. So it really, I mean, I'd say Peter's performance is the one really surprising thing for me, because he really made it his own. And to be perfectly blunt, he's known as a director, and I was very confident in his abilities, having just seen him interviewed, and I'd seen his work on The Sopranos, and he was great. But it was a bit of a flyer for sure, and that's what made it exciting. That was really cool to just see what he'd do different every day.
I've always liked his presence on screen, actually,
yeah.
as an actor. I always feel very comfortable with him.
Yeah, no. What? It's funny. You never expect it. He's a ham. He would be telling all these like old Borscht Belt jokes between takes and singing every show. He had a song for every single situation, a little show tune moment. And he really is a great performer. He really is.